The power of anticipation, right? The power of anticipation. Perhaps you remember it as a child, the night before Christmas, a restless sleep followed by no need for sort of those obnoxious mom routines of shaking and stirring and trying to awaken kids with singing. You don't need to do that on a Christmas morning because they're up and ready. For some of you, it may be very early, but they're ready to go. The anticipation that's not fearful, but it's full of joy. And so, as I mentioned, we want to get ourselves into the Christmas story. We want that anticipation that is a powerful thing. Being expectant, being eager, being excited for what is to come. But unless that expectation, unless that anticipation has as its object something real, it's going to frustrate us. It's going to dash our hopes. It's going to be ineffective, we might say, in motivating us for living today. Because you know this, anticipation of something that you dread, it actually produces not joy but anxiety. Anticipation of something that you've been hoping wouldn't come but has come, it just produces fearful, anxious worry. And let's just be honest as we begin this Christmas season. Some of you dread the holidays. You dread the holidays because they have bad memories. You dread the holidays because there's just been disappointment in the course of your life. Sometimes you kind of gear up as a Sunday comes and you're like, Christmas is starting. Thanks, Pastor Mark. Here we go. I don't like this season very much because there's been unmet expectations. Family isn't what you hoped it would be. And you're sort of tired of hoping that it will be something different. But here, we need to rehearse that there is something that we actually look forward to that's more than family, friends, celebrations, but it is the joy of the King. Just listen for a moment before we look to the scriptures of what some of the wise of the world, I say wise of the world, have to say about anticipation. Most travel, they say, is best of all in the anticipation or the remembering, right? You sort of looked for that trip, but the reality has more to do with losing your luggage. Right? There's the anticipation, there's the expectation, but when it comes to it, travel plans don't turn out the way you did. You lose your luggage, you don't make your connecting flight, the car breaks down, and so why expect or anticipate something? Another says, expecting is the greatest impediment to living. In anticipation of tomorrow, it loses today. Again, you see the sort of the dashed hopes of those that have an expectation for something, but it only disappoints. Or how about this? When things mean a very great deal to you, exciting anticipation, listen, just isn't safe. Why anticipate something when it's only going to disappoint? It's not safe to be hopeful. It's not safe to look ahead. It's not safe to anticipate. Or lastly, this one, a great source, this is just sad, a great source of calamity lies in regret and anticipation. Therefore, a person is wise who thinks of the present alone, regardless of the past or future. That's just discouraging. That's just hopeless and joyless. And listen, if the prophets whom God spoke through of the coming of the Savior thought this way, they would have utterly rejected the one who was to come in the future, because it was those promises that kept them going. It was the hope of something greater that gave them the confidence to keep living today. And I think as we begin this Christmas season, we all need some of that hope, some of that confidence, some of that joy-filled anticipation. Not the calamity that's going to disappoint, but a God who's faithful, because there was a child who was born. Theirs, the prophets, was not a pie in the sky kind of emotionalism. sort of hoping that good things would one day happen to God's people. No, they had, as you see, the title of our sermon, they had a joyful anticipation that drove them to make the most of the present because of the future. To make the most of the present because of the future. So let me just ask you this morning, is your anticipation, maybe of this season, maybe of what you see on the horizon for your life, for your family, for your future, is your anticipation full of joy? Or maybe you need to work through some unmet expectations in your story. Maybe you need to work through some disappointments. The right kind of anticipation, I would tell you, friends, it can transform your Christmas. The right kind of anticipation can transform your family and your mission in life. So that's the theme that we want to anticipate this morning. And as we do, I pray that you'll ask God to do something surprising in your life this Christmas season. You'll ask God to do something that's different than what you've just sort of expected. Just the same old thing. That there's some things that you're praying, hopefully, that maybe you're like ready to quit praying because you just haven't seen them happen yet. And that this might renew your joy to trust the Lord and know him. So we're in Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. I invite you to make your way to Isaiah if you haven't yet already. And as we begin, really, we see 2 points this morning. The first is that of light invading in verses 1 and 2. Light invading. Your anticipation will be joyful if you welcome the light, if you look for the work of God to cast out the darkness. What we're talking about here is longings, having spiritual longings. I spent a week during the summer in Alaska a number of years ago. And if you've spent time in Alaska during the summer, you know that it goes something like this. By about 2 a.m, it starts to maybe feel like dusk. And then by 5, it's like midday again. Like the sun never really sets during the summer in Alaska. And there's something that's strange about it because we've come to anticipate the cycles of darkness and light and darkness and light. And as much as the darkness feels perhaps overwhelming, it's something about the dark that makes the sunrise, the dawn breaking through, something that we anticipate with sweetness. There is something, let's just play that out spiritually. There is something that is so brilliant about seeing a life. Maybe this is your testimony about seeing a life that felt dark and hopeless, that felt perhaps selfish and full of sin, that is shattered by the gospel, and the light breaks through. The anticipation of the Spirit breaking in. You see, the great light that the prophets spoke of has come and continues to penetrate through the darkness of those who are still walking in darkness. Let's just look at verses 1 and 2, Isaiah chapter 9. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shined. The people in that region of Galilee that the prophet is speaking of were historically the ones referred to as people walking in darkness. This region. Sure, it's just coincidence, right, that Jesus was born in this region, light breaking into the darkness, or that he made his Galilean headquarters there in Capernaum, on the other side of the Jordan, as it says here. the Galilee of the nations. What's amazing about the prophet Isaiah is that he was prophesying not only of the nations of Israel and Judah who would be deported by the Assyrian Empire, the northern nation of Israel in 722, and then the southern kingdom of Judah in 586 that would be deported and become foreigners and exiles, but he's seeing not only to that dark day, but then beyond that, a light that would yet come. Not just in them returning to the land that once dwelt in deep darkness, but even further to a king who would return to their land. This is the beauty of the prophets that sometimes we have to see as we read and understand the story of God. It's like a mountain range, these cool little mountains we have, right? Like you could see to one side of the mountain, and that's where you thought the prophecy would be fulfilled. But once you get to that peak, right, if you've ever gone hiking, you see that actually you're not on the highest peak yet. There's another yet to climb. And here in Isaiah, there was not only the promise of these people who would be returned to their land, that there would be light in the darkness, but that a king would come who would be the light that would penetrate the darkness of their hearts. When this historically did occur, Matthew records the fulfillment of these words in his gospel. But listen to how Luke references this light invasion. It says in Luke chapter 1, verses 78 and 79, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the sunrise shall visit us from on high, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. So again, as we consider the promise of light invading, let me just ask this question again to you. Are you expectant? Are you anticipating where God is going to invade your darkness? I don't know if they still have these parking spots, but I remember when my wife was pregnant, they had these expectant mothers parking. Yeah? It's like living in that parking spot. Are you living in the place where you are spiritually anticipating God doing something above and beyond what you could ask or imagine? I find that it can be all too easy to settle into thinking that life is just going to continue the way that it always has. This darkness in my heart, this sin that I've struggled with, is really never going to go away. I've tried, and I just keep coming back to it. Or perhaps it's a family member or a friend, and you think, well, I've prayed, and they've gone round and round in this cycle of addiction, of sin, of just nasty habits. And it's just not going to change. And you've lost that sense of expectancy. God's going to do something in your life. God's going to change you. God's going to use you to see other people come to Christ. Maybe it's been a while since that's happened. Maybe it's been a while since you've had the opportunity to share your faith with an unbelieving friend or family member and to see that God's going to bring light into people's darkness through you. You see, this isn't a pie in the sky hope because the light has already come. It is not a message of empty change. This isn't just sort of pep talk we give ourselves. So the first point, light invading, is that we would make our anticipation full of joy by longing for the light of Jesus to invade every part of your dark soul. There would be no room left in the dark, no hallway that you walk down where you don't open the door and flip the switch because of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Light invading. From light invading to joy increasing. The glorious way that is described by the prophet Isaiah brings light and it brings joy. Look at verse 3 in your copy of the scriptures. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. If you just were to underline joy, rejoice, joy, glad, you'd see it 4 times there in verse 3. You have increased its joy. They rejoice as with joy, as they are glad. And then it says the nation being multiplied. This is more than just the nation of Israel and Judah deported off to Assyria and then Babylon. This is the nations, right? This is the Messiah King who came not only for the nation of Israel, but the nation being multiplied. It going out to Jews and Gentiles. But notice one other thing here in verse 3. It says you. Isaiah is now speaking of this light invading Messiah, and he speaks to him directly. You, Jesus, thousands of years before he comes, have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. He is the one who brings the joy. He's not talking about him in some obscure, abstract third person, but he speaks of him and to him directly. So this joyful anticipation, it flees any sense of negativity, and it revels in the increasing joy of the one that the prophets have spoken of. 3 ways that this joy is increased to us through the one who comes. And the first, it speaks in verse 4 of the deliverance that is coming. Look at verse 4. For the yoke, and he goes now back to his. From you, he's rejoicing in the you of that, the joy that has come. And now he describes what the one who has come and will come has brought. For the yoke of his burden, verse 4, and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. This is about the deliverance that is coming. This mighty deliverance of God that is coming. And remember, Isaiah speaks of it not only of the nation of Israel's return to the land, but of the king's deliverance that would come that first Christmas. Deliverance from slavery and deliverance from every oppressor and enemy with a clear and decisive victory. It says on like the day of Midian. Judges chapter 7 records this great account of God's obvious victory through the man Gideon. He reduced the numbers from Gideon's army, if you remember that Old Testament story. He kept whittling down the number that Gideon would go to battle with, all the way down to 300 through some of the strangest of events, right? Gideon, too many people, and you're going to take credit. And so he whittles that down to Gideon's army of 300 people against armies that are described as locusts and camels too many to number. And with those 300, listen, 120,000 are slain. That's a decisive victory, is it not? 300 slay 120,000. And if we were to get into that Gideon story and the Battle of Midian, I would argue that actually the Lord whittled it down to the 300 who were the most foolish and inept soldiers that battled and slayed the 120,000. Why does Isaiah bring this battle to light in this text? Well, because that battle and that deliverance, he's saying it's as ridiculous that a baby will bring this kind of deliverance to your darkness. It's as ridiculous as 300 inept soldiers destroying vast armies. If you or I were going to deal with the darkness that is in our world, I'm quite certain our remedy would not be For unto us a child is born. A child? I don't need a child. I need weapons of mass destruction. And he says the remedy to the darkness of the world, it's a baby. I haven't seen this commercial in a while, but you remember the E-Trade baby? These commercials was like babies sitting at a computer, like trading stocks and talking with an adult voice. It's just kind of a ridiculous picture where you're like a baby, of course. And I think they were trying to show how easy it is to be able to make these trades, right? It's this picture of a baby being the one that will remedy the darkness and the depression of the world in which we live. This kind of deliverance brings great joy. This one to come, this one who has come and will come again. Deliverance. The second way that we see this joy increasing is in verse 5, and it is peace ruling. Look at verse 5. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. Again, perhaps you've read this famous Christmas prophecy, and you've just sort of skipped by some of these things because you're like, I don't know what that has to do with this story of Christmas. Well, see, here, this is a picture of joy increasing as peace rules the day. All of these things we see in verse 5 are tools of war, boots and garments. This is what the soldier would have put on in order to go to war. These are the trappings of great destruction that now are no longer needed. You don't need boots anymore. You burn them. No dirty, blood-stained uniforms, cloaks. Burn them. Peace will rule, is what he's saying. Oh, that day. First coming of Jesus inaugurated these great joys. And the second coming of Jesus is going to bring them to consummation, to completion, to finality. And so when we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate not only thanking the Lord for the first coming of Jesus, but we thank him and the anticipation that the King again will come. It's hard to imagine a world without war. It's hard to imagine no ceasefires needed in Lebanon, no war in Ukraine. See, the greatest Christmas gift for soldiers and civilians alike is the gospel joy of the one who has come and will come to burn the boots, where the soldiers will gather around all of their uniforms and boots and weapons being burned, and they're just using it to roast s'mores over. It's peace. Deliverance coming, peace ruling, all because of a baby. The third and final way that Isaiah sees the joy increasing is a child. The God-man come to earth. Look at verse 6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. You've got to put yourself back into the shoes of the nation of Israel, who is being told that they're going to be carried off into captivity. And Isaiah says, but there's hope yet to come. Don't lose hope. Be expectant, anticipate. And it's even better than you could possibly imagine. It's not just that you're going to come back to your house one day. There's a greater hope. And it's a baby. You're going like, a baby? This is the one that's been prophesied about. This is where the story starts. And it's to fill our hearts with hope and joy and anticipation. If this doesn't make us smile at this time of year, I'm not sure what will. The deliverance, the peace, the light invading, the joy increasing, the answer is a child. This child is the sign that Isaiah spoke of to the nation in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, another one of those famous Christmas prophecies where Isaiah just 2 chapters earlier said, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The people certainly were asking, well, how are we going to know when this comes? How are we going to know when this light and joy and hope comes to fulfillment? Well, here's the sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. This son of the virgin will come and establish his rule, stake his claim, and the world will never be the same. See, this language here in Isaiah chapter 9 points to a definite, emphatic, no doubt kind of coming. Got to remember again, this is centuries before we ever meet Mary and Joseph. Yet Isaiah saw it all as it was done. How many must have called Isaiah a fool, a dreamer, told him like those worldly wisdom that we started with, man, anticipation's only going to disappoint you. Don't hope for something as ridiculous as this. Live in the present. Wake up and smell the coffee. It must have said to Isaiah, living in the future isn't safe. It's only going to bring you disappointment. But Isaiah the prophet knew that God was to be trusted. And his expectancy was founded on the Word of God. This first Sunday of Advent, we need to ask the question, who is this baby, this sign that the prophets spoke of? At Jesus' first coming, he may not have been addressed by all of these titles that we see here in Isaiah chapter 9, but they are accurate descriptions of his being, of his character. And we get to understand them and delight in them. There are 4 titles that we see here in verse 6. A couple of the older translations have 5, but there are 4. It's not Wonderful Counselor, it's Wonderful Counselor. That's the first title that he's given. He's a wonderful counselor. Now, again, the purposely chosen titles as God reveals himself to Isaiah. In your darkness, in your hopelessness, in the cycle that you feel yourself unable to get out of, do you need a good counselor? Do you need a wonderful counselor? He's not just an extraordinary person that's come to ease your pain. He's described in the scriptures as a wonder. A wonder. It's the word actually that describes miracles. I got to tell you, I have a hard time believing these things. It's easy for me to think those days have passed. The miracle working counselor? I see people in my life that seem trapped, unable to sort of rescue themselves, unable to get out of these situations that they're in. And we have a miracle working counselor, a wonder of a counselor. This is the one that was promised. This is the child who would come. He's a wonderful counselor. He's a mighty God, it describes. In other words, it's this war language. He's a hero. He's a hero, listen, whose chief characteristic is that he is God. Not just a human hero. This child is God. He's a God of might. He's a mighty God. In other words, he has the power to make good on all his promises. He's not just going to counsel you and counsel through you in the way that you or others ought to go, but he has the power to actually accomplish it. The third description of this baby that we're given here in Isaiah chapter 9 is as an everlasting father. This is a strange title for a child, isn't it? This child, listen, this child acts towards his children as a father. He guards his people. He supplies their needs, regardless of what your earthly father was like. And even the best of them could not do it perfectly. Here, this child is going to be as a father to you, supplying your needs, protecting you now and forever. Now and forever. He's eternally a father. to his people. What comfort that brings, what hope, what anticipation of what is to come. And then lastly, it says he's a Prince of Peace. He's the one who has secured our peace, having satisfied the claims of justice so that God can declare, listen, the sinner at peace. Again, in this language of war and rescue and deliverance, he is a peace, he is a prince, not by war, but by peace. He brings not a temporary peace, not merely a truce or a ceasefire, but the reason for war is removed forever. Sin is defeated. This is how Paul describes this in Romans chapter 5, one of my favorite verses to just let wash over my heart. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have what? We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. He's the Prince of Peace. He has brought peace. One commentator describes it this way: true peace comes to us because a child was born. That child and he alone is the Prince of Peace. Would we have peace? It is to him that we must go. When the peace of God is in the human heart, then there will be manifest in the world peace among men. This is the description of this child, this deliverer, this light invading one. And then lastly, in verse 7, the text answers the question, what is it that this child will accomplish? Verse 7 reads, of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The first thing that this wonderful counselor, everlasting Father, mighty God, Prince of Peace will do is his rule and his peace never diminishes. Again, it's so easy for us to go, man, that's never going to happen. It is going to happen. It is going to happen as certainly as the king came the first time as a baby born in a manger. His rule and his peace that will be over all of the land in his kingdom. It says, secondly, he upholds justice and righteousness. Maybe some of the darkness and some of the discouragement and some of the reason that you don't even have expectation and hope anymore is because you've just said, man, justice doesn't really happen. It doesn't pay to obey. The evil prosper, and those that try to do right never get a break. It won't always be that way. Because when he comes, what he accomplishes is justice and righteousness. A justice and righteousness that is not merely external, but is the righteousness that he accomplishes for you and I before God, such that we are made righteous, perfect. And then it says that he does all of this to put his glory on display. It says the zeal which Yahweh has for his own glory will bring about this result. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do that. His glory put on display. Let me just ask you as we close this morning, does your Christmas celebration include the prophet's joyful anticipation? This is where the story starts. And this is the challenge that I want to give you this morning. Don't let this season just be another ho-hum Christmas season. He's already come. He's already come. Do you live like he's coming again? Do you live with hope and expectation? Do you wake up every day anchored by the future so you can make the most of your mission today? Is your Christianity just I hope it happens. I hope it works out. I hope things go that way. Or is it a rock-solid confidence? Because if it's not that rock-solid confidence, guess what? It's just apathy and indifference. Do you have an expectancy for light to invade darkness in your own life, in your home, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, that you wake up ready to taste it? God, what are you going to do today? Surprise me. Break through the darkness. I have an Advent challenge for you that I'm going to lay out for you in just a minute. But first, I wanted you to hear the joy of Christian and Debbie Hatfield, who are grandparents yet again. Congratulations, brother. They had a new little granddaughter. And you're going to get to hear some of Christian and Debbie's story of joy in the midst of darkness. A good reminder of this very text and what we're called to be.
For us, the biggest, most eventful, life-changing thing was the death of our son.
He was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 5. We were told that it was terminal, and so we made some heavy decisions.
So we had to choose between the quality of life versus a low success rate of surviving a bone marrow transplant. And I think we made the right choice because we got to spend that time with him.
Our community was integral to our sanity, and that the people there loving our other children, bringing meals like for a long time, like in and out throughout the year, friends just rallying.
It was a time for both of us that we were so aware of God's presence. That there were times I know when I didn't have the strength or the patience or whatever it was I needed, He provided that. So a verse I clung to myself was Psalm 121, 1 and 2, which is, I lift my eyes to the hills, and where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. Joy was not, at that time, I think it felt hard to come by.
When things are easy, it's easy. That's just the truth, right? It's in the hard times that He does something unbelievable that only He can do.
With that experience came a perspective, a harder focus on when Scripture talks about this life is but a vapor. We're only here for a short time. And why are we here then? We're here for His purposes, His glory. Where are we going? This is not our forever home. We're going to be with the Lord.
Which is a sweetness, because we know we're going to be with Jesus. We also get the bonus of being with our son.
Yeah.
And those that we love that know Jesus, right? So really, and of course we're this many years forward, joy is something that was also grew.
To remember that Jesus said this world will have many trials, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So
It sure has. I would say Christmas, that is the time to embrace the gift that God gave through His Son, because it's through His Son that we have that hope.